guys, welcome to my channel. So this is my first YouTube video and today we're going to be talking about a case that I knew I wanted to do as soon as I knew that I was going to start a true crime YouTube channel, because I find it just so interesting and there are so many elements of it that hit pretty close to home. So I wanted to explore it, and I'm sure that some of you know about this case already because the Fifth Estate did a really great documentary on it a few years ago, but there's been some developments since then, so I just wanted to cover it again. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about the case of Neil Bantleman. Neil Bantleman was born in London in 1969, but his parents were initially from India and they moved to England later in their life, and then finally they settled in Canada. And Neil went to the University of Toronto, and he has a major in sociology and a minor in Canadian and American history. So clearly did very well in school. Actually wanted to be in law enforcement, but he couldn't do that because he had a hereditary eye disorder or disease that prevented him from being able to go into law enforcement. So he just settled for teaching, and he moved to Alberta, Calgary, Alberta actually, where he met his wife Tracy. And they've been together ever since, and him and Tracy hit it off right away. They were both physical education teachers, and everybody in their school loved them so much, but they really wanted to travel and see the world. So in a few years after they met in Alberta and got married, they moved to Singapore, which is in Southeast Asia. They wanted to explore that region of the world in different countries in Southeast Asia. So in Singapore, they both taught at a school, a Canadian school in Singapore, and they taught there for a few years, both as physical education teachers. And then in 2010, they took on a job offer in an Indonesian International School. It's a private school and it teaches only an international curriculum. They don't teach the local curriculum, or maybe some schools do, like hybrid schools teach both the local curriculum and the international curriculum, but the one that Neil went to only teaches an international Western curriculum. It attracts a lot of expats and children of expats and diplomats who want to give their child a Western education, or very wealthy Indonesian parents who want to send their children to universities outside of Indonesia after they've graduated. A very small circle of students. I think the school had around 2,000 students overall. Neil and his wife Tracy did really well there. The principal spoke really highly of them, said that they were a very attractive couple who were just amazing and so involved in the community and everything. But the story sort of starts in March 2014, which is 4 years after they first got to Indonesia. And this was just, and Neil said that this was the beginning of the nightmare, he just didn't know it yet. A horrific allegation came out. A mother of a kindergarten student came forward with an allegation that her child had been sexually assaulted by a cleaner at the school. And she said that her child told her that the cleaner went into a bathroom, locked him in there, anally raped him. Immediately the school called an emergency parents meeting where all the parents came in and everyone was very emotional. One of the parents who was at that meeting said that everyone came in thinking that something definitely happened, or 99% of them came in thinking that something happened in there, and they wanted to know the truth and they wanted justice. And when the parent talked about what her child said to her, it was absolutely horrific. After the parent shared her sort of experience and what her child said to her, another parent came out and said in the same meeting that her child also said that he was attacked in the school. And after the meeting was done, a few days later, one of the parents came out publicly and told the media about this story. It was a media circus afterwards. This story was picked up by all the big media sources, and the mother said that she took her child to do a few tests, and the tests suggested that her child had contracted herpes, and she she went to the police with these papers, waving them around in front of the media, and demanded that they do something about it. To the police this time, she told the police that her son told her that he was, and remember, this is a kindergarten child, he's like 5 or 6 years old, and he told her that he had been assaulted by multiple janitors in the school. So this wasn't just a standalone incident anymore. He said that multiple janitors repeatedly assaulted him, and that this was a regular occurrence, basically. It wasn't just one incident that just stopped there. She announced in front of the media that she was going to sue the school for negligence for $12.5 million US dollars. When this got out, this absolutely enraged the public. They couldn't believe that teachers in a prestigious international school could be doing this to their students. So this sparked a massive protest. They were knocking down the school gates, demanding answers. So under all of this pressure, the police began interrogating the people that the 5-year-old kid had picked out of a lineup of janitors that when the police asked him, he picked out 5 men and 1 woman who he said was an accomplice, and they were all arrested, and they were paraded in front of the media with masks over their heads, and they were taken into custody, police custody. And they all said that they were completely innocent, they didn't do any of it, they don't know what he was talking about, but this all changed after one night where the next day they all gave confessions. And one by one they said that they did it, they were guilty, but later they then revoked these confessions and said that it was beaten out of them in the police interrogation room. And unfortunately, apparently they were beaten so bad. One cleaner actually died in custody. A 27-year-old male cleaner died in police custody, and the police told the media that he died because he had committed suicide. He drank bleach in one of the bathrooms and committed suicide, but a lot of people think that he was actually beaten to death because I'm obviously not going to show it on my video because I just don't believe in showing like dead bodies on my videos, but you can definitely search it up. There's a picture of him after his death, and he was completely bruised up. And of course, a dead body changes after death, and it sort of bloats, but that doesn't look like what happened to him. It looks like he was horrifically beaten, so we don't know if he died because of that beating, but he was definitely beaten before his death. Even if they tried to revoke their confessions later, the remaining cleaners, the 5 remaining cleaners who were still alive, the males got 8 years in prison, and the female got 7 years for being an accomplice. But that still wasn't enough for the mother who was suing the school. She began to change her story again, and she said that she changes her story again, and she said that she questioned her son, and he said that he actually saw a teaching assistant and a teacher assault boys in the school, and the boy said that he recognized who the teacher was. The teacher was Neil Bantleman, and the teaching assistant was a man called Ferdinand Tijong. And the police then arrested them both, and they were questioned and put in jail. So after Neil was in custody, the police, and this wasn't announced at the time, but it was later showed in court documents, that the police raided the school on June 13th, 2014, and they collected a bunch of clues and a bunch of evidence. Or evidence, there was, we'll get into that. So they went into the school and they searched. First they looked at Neil's office, which I don't think there's any way that it could have happened in there, because Neil's office had 4 walls that were made out of glass, and it was in the busiest part of the Jakarta Intercultural School, so it's not plausible that any crime happened there. But then they went up the stairs to the teacher's lounge, which is in the 2nd floor, and they tried to find evidence of what the child said. And he said that when he was assaulted in a secret room near the teacher's lounge, and that Neil had inserted what he called a magic stone into his anus so that it would numb the pain, and then he was fed a secret blue potion. They couldn't find any evidence of a secret room or any evidence of a stone or any evidence of a blue potion, but they did find a blender that they said could have been used to mix the blue potion. And that was all they could collect. They couldn't find any witnesses that saw anything in the school at that time. And remember, he said that he was assaulted in school hours. So it's pretty unlikely that nobody would have seen it, because a school is super busy all the time. The teacher's lounge, there are teachers going in and out of it all the time, and there is no secret room, so difficult to believe that something had happened there. But even without physical evidence, there was still the testimony of the kids and the test the mother said that she had that showed her kid had herpes. They also couldn't find any DNA or any evidence of fingerprints that could lead back to the kids having been in there in the first place. The mother didn't let go. She then went on a very popular Indonesian show called the Indonesian Lawyers Club, and she told her story there again, reiterated that she believed that the teachers and the teaching assistant assaulted her child. And I'm a little bit torn about this mother, because if she truly believed that her child had been assaulted, I'm sure that that's how every single mother would have reacted. She would have done everything to get justice for her child, but the mother's credibility has been brought into question because of the things that she's about to do next. But on this TV show, she's very compelling. She goes through all of the stuff that happened, and she describes in horrific detail how her son had begged the assailants to stop, but they just wouldn't. They kept assaulting him and all of that. It was very heavy stuff, and it won her a lot of support, and the media and the Indonesian people really rallied around her. And shortly after this, she held a press conference with her lawyer, and they announced that they would be increasing the amount of money that they wanted from the school from $12.5 million US dollars to $125 million US dollars. And this really raised a red flag with the other parents who were in the parents meeting and who were other parents of other kids in the school, because they began to sort of doubt her motives, because parents actually said that they believed that after the teachers was named and the teaching assistant was named, think that maybe this was about money rather than getting justice for her child, and they actually started to doubt her story and the validity of her story and the validity of her claim. But then the first trial commenced, and it was held behind closed doors, allegedly to protect the children. But I find that very odd, because the children's identities were revealed during the reading of the verdict, which was 6 hours long, and they named all of the children in the verdict. So I'm not sure why it couldn't have been public, but nobody got to hear all of the details of this trial. It was completely secretive, and a lot of people were very, very critical about it because they said it lacked transparency. Even the people who didn't believe that Neil was innocent also believed that this trial was conducted in a way that lacked a lot of transparency. And it seemed like the judge was already biased and didn't intend to hear the case in a way that was fair for both parties. She already had preference to what she believed the truth to be, and this reflected in the way that they conducted the case, because they basically threw out everything that the defense brought to the case, but they take in evidence. They actually drew from a sex counselor's testimony that that Neil and his wife had sex once a week, and that was why he increased his chance of being a pedophile, which she also accepted the evidence of the magic stone, even though no object was recovered when they checked the school and there's no evidence of it existing. And another really insane part of the trial is that the prosecution actually presented a bunch of letters from different people that Neil knew who said that he couldn't have done it, and it was basically a character witness for him, and saying that he was a very good person, that he could never do it. And the judge actually threw it out and said that some of the language in it was threatening and sort of meant to threaten the court into doing something, and it was completely dismissed. And I'm pretty sure you guys know where this is going. The judge actually came back with a guilty verdict for both Neil and Ferdinand, and they both got 10 years in prison in a maximum security prison in Indonesia. And everybody in their lives, most people in the school, and especially his wife Tracy, thought this was a complete miscarriage of justice. His brother in Canada as well, they thought that the trial was a complete sham that was totally influenced by the public outcry and the anger of the Indonesian public. And even Neil's lawyer said that the judge doesn't want to give out any verdict that contradicts the public opinion, because that would be extremely unpopular and make it more difficult for them to keep their jobs. And this verdict really made Tracy, his wife, very angry, and she started reaching out to other avenues that could help her overturn the verdict and set her husband free. So she started contacting media outlets, and this was actually already global news because it was a Canadian teacher, a Canadian citizen, being convicted and jailed in Indonesian jail. And it was eventually picked up by The Fifth Estate, which is a true crime show in Canada, and they did their own investigation. It's very thorough. I took most of the information from that documentary, so you guys should definitely go watch it. One of the most important things they did was they secured an interview with the mother who was suing the school and who had the tests that her child had herpes. And they actually allowed them to review the tests, and they gave it to a independent infectious disease specialist based in Toronto, and he looked over the tests. And this is remember, because there isn't any physical evidence in this case, there weren't any witnesses, the only thing that this case hinges on is the testimony of the children and the test that said that one of the children had herpes. So the independent expert from the Fifth Estate looked over the tests, and he said that the first test did say that the child was positive for herpes, but that test would never stand up in a Canadian court because it used a very unreliable method to conduct, and so it could have given false positives. So they did a second test in Europe, and the mother did it on her own in Europe, and it came back with a clinical note that said that the child had never been exposed to herpes. So the Fifth Estate suggested a third test that they did with the mother, and it came out negative. So this suggests, according to the specialist, that the first test was a false positive and that the child had never been exposed to herpes. So the whole herpes thing was completely just not accurate. So this really poked a hole in her case, and the school, the international school, Indonesian International School, also hired their own investigator to do the case, to do a investigation of what happened and to provide a report to the principal. And in the report it also said that nothing happened in the school ground. And so Bantleman's conviction was overturned in August 2015. High Court overturned it because there was just so many holes in the case and so many inconsistencies in what the child said and the lack of evidence for it. So the case just didn't hold up. And also, along with that, the civil suit of $125 million that Pipit levied against the school was also dropped, was thrown out. And she and her family moved to Europe to, she says, protect her child's identity and let him live a normal life again. I was really happy about this, but the celebration was really short-lived because the public outcry to his release was enormous. They thought that the High Court had just let a predator out onto the streets, a predator who had abused young children, young boys, and they were incredibly angry. And so the Indonesian Justice Department decided to appeal their release just days later, and they started building a case to put him back in jail, back in prison. He was stuck in what was essentially a legal limbo because they revoked his visa and passport, and they literally kept him there, so he couldn't leave the country. He was stuck in Indonesia in legal limbo, waiting for his next trial. And the next trial finally came, and shockingly, the Indonesia Supreme Court reinstated his conviction, and they tacked on an additional year into that. And so he went back to prison after the Fifth Estate documentary, and he was granted clemency only recently. So he spent years in prison at this point, and he was granted clemency in 2019 only. And no one knows how this clemency agreement was reached, but it's largely speculated that the Canadian and Indonesian government had private talks and they negotiated something behind the scenes. The Canadian government won't talk about it. This really is a very unsatisfying ending to the story because he wasn't released on the basis that he was proven innocent. He was released because of clemency, which is not the same thing. And Neil is back in Ontario now with his family. He's very happy to be back home. He actually released a statement saying that he continues to say that he had been wrongfully accused of this crime. He didn't do it. He didn't do anything that he was accused. It's just such a sad story because all the other Indonesian people who are accused, the five cleaners and the one teaching assistant is still languishing in jail. They didn't receive any sort of clemency. They were convicted with pretty much the same evidence that Neil was convicted with, which had a bunch of holes in them, as we discussed. They've sort of exhausted all their legal avenues. They don't have any appeals left, and they're just going to serve out almost a decade in jail for something that likely didn't happen the way that it was described. And think about it, it was hinged upon the testimony of three kindergarten-age children, and there's no physical evidence for it. There's no witnesses, no DNA, no nothing.